closer look at a group which makes up more than a fifth of the entire electorate, single women. Today, just 20% of Americans are married by age 29 compared to 60% in 1960. And among that group, there's a lot of interest in this election. We caught up with a few women today to ask whether they felt having a female candidate has changed the political conversation.
And it's ugly. We're seeing people really saying some pretty nasty things about women and being pretty afraid of women in power.
I think it really showed the kind of intense patriarchy and misogyny that was involved in our community that a lot of people weren't aware of or didn't care about before. There's a lot of sexism that came up with this election that just didn't have a stage before, didn't have a platform.
No, I think there's a lot of the identity politics that go on. I think there's a lot of, women's rights, and if you're against certain things, then you're not for women, and I don't necessarily agree with that position.
Joining me now is someone who's all over this, focusing on one group in particular. Her new book is All the Single Ladies, Unmarried Women, and the Rise of an Independent Nation. Rebecca Tracer also writes for New York Magazine and The Cut. She joins me now. Rebecca, it's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you.
Why such a seismic shift? And also, women are getting married much later. I know that from you as well. Why is that happening?
Well, for a lot of reasons, because after the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement of the 20th century, all kinds of new economic and political and professional possibilities opened up for women. There's the possibility that they could live lives outside of marriage because circumstances had changed. They no longer have to be economically, socially, and sexually dependent on husbands. So you have a massive increase in the population of women who are living outside of marriage, either for their entire lives or spending more of their early adulthoods single before they get married.
Is the culture caught up with this, or it's trailing the demographics?
Well, you see pop cultural representation of it increasingly, whether you're talking about all the single ladies and Beyonce music or television and girls and Mindy Kaling. But what we haven't done is caught up in terms of our economic and social policy, and those are a lot of the policy questions that are on the table in this election.
Speaking of that, I looked up today the margin that, you know this, I'm sure better than I, single women for Barack Obama, 36%. The most recent poll I saw, only 27% for Hillary Clinton. Why? That's a big gap, 10 points.
Are you looking at single women or
single.
Young women?
I think I'm looking at single.
It's interesting. The polling that I have seen so far is in 2012, 67% for Obama.
67 to 31.
To 31.
Yeah.
I've been seeing polling that has them between 70 and 80% of single women.
Oh, even higher, you think,
much
with
higher,
Hillary Clinton.
yes. Yeah. No, but we don't know yet. We don't know. Those are estimates.
Speaking of Hillary Clinton, you wrote Big Girls Don't Cry, obviously, about the 2008 campaign, which was terrific, by the way, in 2010. It seems to me, I was going to say a casual observer, but not as intense an observer as you, Hillary Clinton is talking a lot more about being the first woman president this time than she did last time. Is that observation accurate?
Oh, absolutely.
Then why is she doing that?
Well, she was coached last time around to not emphasize the fact that she was a woman.
The Mark Penns of the world?
Mark Penn wrote her memos saying, do not emphasize the fact that you're a historic character. It was a mistake. That was a year in which we were hungry to make history. Barack Obama had his own set of anxieties about how to present himself as the first. Right. But it turned out to be a miscalculation, although I'm not even sure that people would have responded to her had she led with the woman thing in 2008. This time, I think she's actually been a far more comfortable campaigner. And yes, she does introduce herself as a historic candidate, but mostly she's just more herself this time. There's a lot less, she's a lot less constrained in her self-presentation this time.
A majority of people aren't crazy about either of these candidates. I hope I got this right. Did I read in a New York Magazine piece you wrote a few months ago that when you were younger, you were a Hillary hater? Is that how you describe yourself?
Yeah, I mean,
those were your words,
going into 2008, I grew up really admiring her when she was the first lady, when I didn't like her political move to the center when she was a senator from my state. I live in New York City. And I was a John Edwards supporter going into 2008. My politics leaned left. She was not to the left. I didn't think John Edwards was. He had an ability as a white man to actually get behind policies that were further to the left than either the African-American or the woman candidate. So I went in a John Edwards supporter. The reason I wrote the book, Big Girls Don't Cry, in part was about my own transformation because by the end of 2008, I had become a Hillary Clinton supporter.
So did you have an epiphany? What happened? What led to the transition?
I watched the way that she was received. And I watched the way that she was treated. I also loved Barack Obama at the end of the 2008 primary.
So was it less about her, but more about how the public responded to Hillary
Yeah,
Clinton?
and it was, but watching how the public responded to her also made me think about her and the circumstances. You know, the line about Hillary is always, it's not because she's a woman, it's because she's that woman. And I think
That's
we
about
tend
almost
to,
every woman.
Right, right. Well, exactly, it's about every woman. And we also give too little thought as to how people become that woman. How did Hillary become that woman?
How did she become that woman?
Right. And that has a lot to do with gender, too, and being this anomalous woman in a wholly male world for so long.
And you think Donald Trump is not an outlier in terms of his sexism or his misogyny? You think that virtually any lead Republican could have been on that bus with Billy Bush? Is that an overstatement or no?
Well, I don't think the behavior is necessarily universal, although it's not unique, right? There's that fine line because, no, as Michelle Obama says, this is not how all men talk. But it is how enough men talk that so many women have had visceral reactions and said, this has happened to me. I've been grabbed. Men have talked that way about me. I mean, that is a fairly universal experience for women, and not everybody's being grabbed by Donald Trump. So it's somewhere in between. But in terms of policy, what he does is make overt a lot of the attitudes that are covert that have been covert in Republican policy as far as women and race and cutting off marginalized populations from greater opportunity. He just does it in cartoonish form.
What does it say? I mean, we spend so much time talking about Donald Trump here, not nearly enough time talking about the people who support him, which is in the many millions, and as you know, it's a race is this close. What does that say about America in 2016, that his popularity is as high as it is, assuming that your reflections on him are accurate?
That there's tremendous anxiety and resentment about the changing status and who has power in this country. And Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama stand as singular symbols, imperfect, flawed symbols, and their base even more, the fact that women and people of color are the Democratic base and that they may have and have had the power to elect presidents. That's a massive shift in who has the power to determine our representation and our policies in this country. And close to half of our country is really resisting that shift in power. And that's what we're seeing in the Trump support.
Let's end where we ended the first segment. Melania Trump, those single women you know probably better than anybody in America. Did she move any of them today? Why not?
Melania Trump is not a moving figure. I mean, and I feel bad. I mean, I dislike her, and I also feel bad for her because I don't think she signed up to be a sort of moral guide, which is what we ask of our first ladies. But she's not, I don't find her persuasive. I don't think many people relate to her. I do think young women liked Ivanka Trump until relatively recently. I think Ivanka was the woman within the Trump orbit who some people responded to. I'm not sure why, I never did. But I do think she was quite popular, and that has faded because she's made so little sense on behalf of her father.
Rebecca Tracer, it's great to meet you.
Thank you so much
for your time. Congratulations on your work.
Thanks
I appreciate
very much.
it. Book again is All the Single Ladies, Unmarried Women, and the Rise of an Independent Nation.